Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, everybody. Another exciting week coming up. There is so much news going on, but we've got a event we want to talk about that's coming up in on May 11th and 12th, I believe. It's called the Internet Equality Summit. That's on the horizon, and it looks to be a real good event to get the word out on what's going on with internet freedom and everything. And ALX Productions is partnering with the Social Media Freedom Foundation to do this event out in Palm Springs, California. It's a nonpartisan event, and it's going to feature a keynote debate between talk show host and New York Times bestselling author Dennis Prager and Grant Stern, who's the executive director of Occupy Democrats and an author. The summit's going to explore issues involved with the protecting of citizens' rights, ensuring corporate transparency and responsibility, and preserving national security. All things that are critically important and on the timeline right now. It offers a symposium for open and productive discussions, investigating solutions that will support our democratic rights and promote a free and open internet for everybody. In the spotlight is going to be Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Jason Fick, the show's friend and the founder of the Social Media Freedom Foundation and director, has been fighting to reconcile the correct application of Section 230 since 2018. On Tuesday, February 7th of this year, Jason filed a petition for a writ of certiorari in the United States Supreme Court that tracks the same legal path as Senator Ted Cruz's, Attorney General of Texas Ken Paxton, and even the Department of Justice's amicus brief in the Gonzalez v. Google case, where Section 230C1 doesn't protect any conduct at all. Jason's my guest this week to talk about this exciting summit and the court case. Jason, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, my friend. How are you?
Thanks for having me on, Colonel Maness. I'm doing pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah, I'm excited about this, but we gotta address the elephant in the room about the summit first. And when I saw that ALX Productions, the event list and the guest list for the main attraction between Dennis Prager and the Occupy Democrats guy, now people call me a little bit right wing. I'm really on just an American on the Constitution. But that's considered right wing these days. So why have an Occupy Democrats leader, actually the leader, as one of the main attractions for this event?
Well, Colonel, the problem is that we don't have discussions. We don't have bipartisan discussions because oftentimes, you'll see the left or what we you would constitute the left shutting it down. And the question is, why are we not having this get together? Well, of course, that's why we put together the summit, right? It's
Right.
not about partisanship. It's about let's have a discussion because, of course, we're going to be raising the question, and that's what this debate is over. And I'm thankful to both Dennis Prager and also to Grant Stern because, of course, they have to defend their own positions on it. But the question is, where does the line get drawn with what is considered free speech online? Is it absolute, where it's anything and everything, or is there a line that should exist between what would be considered offensive, truly offensive? But the question is, where does that line exist? Because if you start deeming some content offensive, well, is any content offensive? I mean, obviously somebody's going to be offended by everything.
Yeah.
So that's what this debate really sets up is and I'm pretty excited about it because honestly, I don't think it's ever happened anything like this. But they're going to debate over where that line exists for free speech online. What
Hmm.
would protect the interests of the public? So it's a pretty exciting event, pretty exciting situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good idea. Like I said, when I first heard about it, I'm excited about it. And I just saw the main event press release that went out just the other day. And actually, I'm really excited that a leftist leader, somebody that's a designated formal leader of a leftist organization like that, is willing to come on the stage and debate somebody like a Dennis Prager at an event that's designed to not divide. As we know, and as I said in my intro, it's a nonpartisan event. And this
Yep.
issue, I think, Jason, uh, really is one I believe that all Americans should be extremely and keenly interested in because, your court case, the reason I ever had you on my show as a guest in the first place was because I myself am being suppressed by folks like YouTube and Facebook. And it's very difficult for me to get the word out on from my show's perspective. And it's just all about trying to get the factual information out to people so that they can decide for themselves, instead of having something that's smoothed over and narrativized, is what I call it, or propagandized by, I don't care what the corporate media is, whether it's Fox News or CBS News or MSNBC, it's all narrativized to be slanted toward one way or the other. And to not be able to get facts out because corporations are ideologically opposed to the facts is not American. It's un-American. It shouldn't matter whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat. People will unite on this issue, won't they?
Yeah, more information is always better than less information. And I
Yeah.
think that that's what really defines what we have going on right now in America is that if if you want to say they're quintessentially right, the quintessential right is that more information. I mean, I don't even care if it's wrong. Just put it out there and let people decide for themselves. But the tactic, which immediately happened with Grant, and it's unfortunate, is as soon as that he posted that he was going to be engaged in a conversation with Dennis, what happened? People attacked him and said, "You're going to give that Nazi fascist a bigger platform." Because they don't have a way to fight the facts. They don't have a way to fight the information. So their only tactic left is to silence the opposition. And of course, that's happening across all of social media right at the moment. Is anything that they don't want out there, they silence. And everybody thinks it's purely political. It's not. It's religious issues. It's and I would say the general theme is anything that the government doesn't want said. Because of course, with the Twitter files, we're seeing that the government has been actively involved in censoring people. Now, the thing about that is that of course everybody's asking the same question. How do we stop this? Right?
Hmm.
And of course, you're one of the first that has had me on and discussing this issue of Section 230. Now, Section 230 is essentially how they get away with it, how it's all been happening because there's a blending now, and it's unfortunate about the separation of powers. Courts
Hmm.
are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And because of that, these companies have been held absolutely immune from everything. And what happens when you have a child that's never disciplined? It grows up into an out of control adult, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what these social media companies became. They became big social media you know um censorship engines, and that's all they're doing these days. And until the courts, it's a big leap. um
Yeah.
Justice Roberts actually brought it up in Gonzalez. He said the economic impact that this is going to have, it is going to have an economic impact on the internet, but it needs to happen is these companies need to be brought back to what they should be doing rather than anything and everything they so choose.
Well,
That's
yeah,
where we're at.
to address that Justice Roberts comment too, from my end, I see that as trying to stave off what should be the inevitable, which is a course correction back to what America stands for, which is freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and the ability to say what you think without fear from the government or corporations that are supported and paid by the government, that are their agents, which is what we now know for sure factually is happening today. I think Matt
Mhm.
Taibbi and Mr. Schellenberger in their testimony the other day called it the secret censorship industrial complex. Referring to the old term that President Eisenhower created when he was leaving the Oval Office about the military industrial complex and giving us a warning about that, which was correct. We now
Yeah.
know. Now we have this censorship industrial complex that's corporations controlled by the government to control what you see and and inevitably what you think based on what you see and hear from an information standpoint. And it's just not the American way. I mean, this is the core right of Americans that it doesn't have to be enshrined in some document like the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. It is the natural right, the freedom of speech and thought without fear of a government that we're supposed to control, right? And that gets me back to your court case. Give us an update on what's going on with that. I mentioned that the cert application in my intro back in February. Where is that case at, and what's happening with it?
So we are back in the United States Supreme Court. We've filed the other petition for writ of certiorari, and we've made this very simple. Um, it, it's it's so simple. You don't need to be an attorney. If you read the petition, you'll realize that what we're essentially asking of the courts right now is to apply Section 230 as written. Just do what the text says. Because what's happened with the courts, and what most people are completely unaware of, is the courts completely deviated from what the legislature said and intended for this law. It has allowed them absolute immunity from everything. And all we're saying is do what the text actually says. So it's not a complex argument, but we've pointed out where the text has essentially failed. And that comes down to the misuse of a definite article, the misread. It's ignoring the general provision, which is called the Good Samaritan general provision. Why aren't they acting as good Samaritans? I mean, that should be the fundamental question of any litigation: is did they act in the interest of the public, or at least in the interest of others, not their own interests, as a good Samaritan? That's the fundamental protection principle of the whole thing. And yet these haven't been applied. And really, the biggest question I think that we have before the court is not asked in the petition, but it is a question that concerns me greatly, because obviously free speech is the tool to accomplish every other job. If we don't have free speech, we can't fix anything, right?
Right.
And 73.7% of Americans' conversations are done on the internet. This is huge. Free speech
Wow.
is at risk here, right?
Yeah.
But the question is the interest of the public more important than the corporate financial interests of big corporation?
Hmm.
That's really what's in front of them. Is if we go with status quo, corporate entities that are working in a partnership with government control speech. That's it. That's what we have going on right now.
And where does that
If
fall into the definition of a economic and governmental structure? On the spectrum, is that like total anarchy or total control? Where does that fall on the spectrum of that? It sounds very familiar to me. It starts with an F, quite frankly. Government controlled corporations.
I was thinking
Fascism. The
oligarch.
the
Yeah, I was
class,
going to
yeah, the classic definition of fascism is
fascism.
where the government controls the corporations.
I
Uh,
would actually classify it as an oligarchy.
yeah.
It's a number of individuals that run very large corporations in conjunction with the government, and they control all
Mhm.
the money that goes through this country. I mean, they're spitting it out every which way they possibly can, and realistically, who's hurting is the interest of the public, which
Yeah.
is why that decision rests on the Supreme Court. Is, are you going to protect the interest of the public? What you swore an oath to the Constitution to protect.
Yeah.
You swore an oath. Do what the text says of the legislature. Stop allowing the courts to do whatever they choose to do, and do what our laws say to do. Protect our constitutional rights. So, the future of America. I mean, I hate being hyperbolic. I really can't stand even patting myself on the back. I just go. I put my head down and I work and I work and I work, and I've got this figured out. And I will say this, because it was even in Susan Prager, Dennis Prager's wife, even articulated the other day. She said that my petition for writ of certiorari may be likely the most important lawsuit in modern history. Free speech may literally rest on the decision. It's
I
that
agree with her.
important.
I agree with her. I think she's right.
Yeah.
It is.
And
It is
that's why
that
you don't hear
important.
it in any of the legacy media. That's why you don't hear it with any of the big corporation, because we are
Yeah.
legitimately getting the job done. It all comes down to what the Supreme Court is going to do here, because we cannot get this done in the California courts. They have no interest
Yeah.
in seemingly in fixing this.
Yeah. So we're still waiting on their decision on the writ.
Yeah, it's up for
Uncertain.
consideration, probably in the next 3 to 4 weeks. I'm assuming it has
Hmm.
yet to be docketed for consideration, but as we expected, Facebook declined to respond to our petition, because what are they going to say? Don't do what the text says. Go with status quo. I mean,
Right.
that's really what they would have to say.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unbelievable. Matter of fact, I just saw this morning on Twitter that YouTube has taken down one of Dr. Peter McCullough's videos, and of course, I had to tweet out that they went back over a year and found enough strikes on videos to remove my show channel completely because just because I dared to talk about vaccine adverse reactions with guests and election integrity, and not even in the election was stolen way. Just here's how we can make sure we have secure and accurate elections. It's just unbelievable what these companies can get away with and what they can get away with at the behest of the government.
Well, think about what you just said. They went back to
Yes,
find enough to qualify to remove an individual, correct?
that's correct.
Right?
That's exactly
So
what happened.
were they targeting offensive materials, which is the purpose of the law, or were they targeting the individual and trying to find a cause? Think about
Yeah,
our judicial system, the way it works. Imagine, I mean, we're seeing that play out in New York right now with the district attorney and Donald Trump. Is that they already have the crime in their head. Now they actually have to find the evidence to prove it. This is the way that they just did what you just said with YouTube is doing is the same thing the
yeah,
DA is doing. We have lost due process. It's gone. And
that's right.
unfortunately, we haven't really done much about it. I mean, this is going to come down to what the courts decide to do nowadays.
Yeah, and we have to do something about it, Jason. I mean, we really do. You mentioned Alvin Bragg's fake. I call it fake. I'll be hyperbolic about it. That's my job. It's a fake indictment process, on what's called a zombie case that's been turned down by the federal government, turned down by his own office before he was elected. Turned down by the federal district prosecutors up in that district. And, uh, uh, and that's one of my concerns is, and I think your case highlights that and always has, but it hasn't really been exposed yet to the public. And that is what you just said is that the criminal court system, the criminal justice system, the courts, is now being manipulated for political and ideological purposes the same way the Section 230 law is being manipulated by the civil courts for political and ideological purposes to go after opponents. And it's almost, well, I'm speechless by it, quite frankly. I don't know how we got here, but we're here. And if we don't do something, then we are about to take a step, especially on the Bragg indictment process, that may not be recoverable, quite honestly. It may not be recoverable from a justice system perspective.
Well, you said you don't know how we got here. I might be able to shed a little light on that.
How did we
Remember
get here?
at the beginning of this conversation, I talked about the fact is that if you don't discipline a child, what do you get ultimately as an adult? Same thing has happened with big tech companies. They have not been disciplined. They've never been held liable, even for completely illegal acts, anti-competitive acts, antitrust acts, nothing. And that's how they became so big. Well,
Yeah,
think about this. Let's apply the same principle to judges. They are given qualified immunity, and the Supreme Court held that that if they're negligent and violate your constitutional rights, there's no consequence. So judges can literally put their thumb blatantly on the scale of justice, tilt it completely away from any litigant in favor of the more powerful litigant, and there's no repercussions whatsoever. So if there's no repercussions, there's no responsibility, what happens? They do whatever they choose. And we are losing our country because of it. Now, the question I have, and it's something that we're exploring right now, I'm hoping to gain a little help from either the Attorney General's office or potentially congressional offices. We have evidence of willful disregard for their constitutional oath. Now, this is not negligent. Negligent means, oops, sorry,
Yeah.
we kind of messed up. Willful, we flat told them that if you deny me a single day in court, having allowed Facebook to take my property, deny me of my liberties, denies me of all remedy. A denial of all remedy for the taking of my properties is what would be considered a regulatory illegal taking. If Section
Hmm.
230 allows them to take our property and destroy it, that's unconstitutional if you don't give them a day in court.
That's right.
And we warned them. We said that this is a violation of my constitutional oath or their constitutional oaths. They ignored it. They didn't care. And see,
Wow.
that's a problem. When they're not taking this seriously, that the people of this country have more power. They are our public servants. We are
Hmm.
the masters. We are the ones that are supposed to control this. And unfortunately, and what I really crazy revelation as I went through this, because as I delved into common law, right, which is different than statutory law, I delved into common law, and common law is we the people, right? This is our
Hmm. Right.
original stuff. They don't teach this to lawyers. They don't teach this in law school, and you have to ask your question, why not? Maybe because it's more powerful than statutory law. If we don't fit their statutory procedures, we can be thrown out. Well, common law doesn't play that way. Common law simply says, I, as one of the people with my sovereign rights, demand that you hear this. Demand it of a servant. And it's something that, a lot more people are paying attention and going backwards to essentially go forwards is go back to our constitutional law,
Hmm.
constitutional rights, and understand what we can and can't do, because I think that's the only way we can recover the situation that we're in.
Yeah. I mean, I was shocked a few years ago when I was talking to attorneys that have been in public office at the federal level and the state level. When I asked them why are these judges and attorneys blatantly not understanding of constitutional law, and they all looked at me with a straight face with the same answer. Well, constitutional law classes don't talk about really the Constitution; they talk about procedure. It's a procedural, uh,
Correct. And
uh,
that's not constitutional at all.
right, exactly, and I think
Procedure
that's
is
what you're referring
statutory.
to.
Mhm.
Procedural issues are the way the courts are being manipulated, and the judges are letting that happen. Uh, is there no? Do we have no recourse with these judges? I mean,
Well,
how does that get addressed?
the other night I was in Twitter Space, which are great things. I'd love to.
Hmm.
I'd invite you to come on and speak with us sometime. Twitter Spaces are like the new town square. They're unfiltered. You can go in there and find real information, and I'm on there, under my name. And we were having this discussion. We're exploring new territory. This is stuff that hasn't been done because realistically they didn't want it done. So now it's a matter of we are trying to figure out how this process works, because now that we have the evidence of all of these crimes, like, I mean, these are really crimes. It's a felony to violate somebody's constitutional oath.
Right.
How do we enforce it? And that's really what you're asking here is, how do we make this happen where if a judge does this, he should be
Watch the
removed?
rest of this interview on Red Voice Media Premium using the link below. Completely uncensored and ad-free. Not a member yet? Try it for $1.